Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today we're joined by Ester Peralez Dieckmann, a woman who has been involved in the community for a lot of years, but not that many.
Thank
Esther,
you, Steve.
So help me understand, you've been an activist, you head up the Office of Women's Policy. Like to learn more about what the office does, but first I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Interesting hobbies, things like that?
Well, I actually am not from California. I've been here about 11 years, but I'm originally from the great state of Texas. And grew up in a family that was very active in politics.
Oh.
You know, in the 1970s, late 60s, my family was very much on the forefront of looking at issues for Latinos in Texas. So very involved in elections, very involved in looking at where is the voice of Latinos in the political process. So I grew up around politics. You know, we had a different party there, other than the two parties that we normally recognize. We had something called the Raza Unida Party. And it was a movement in Texas during the 70s to try to gain political presence, participation of Latino people. So, you know, from the age of 8, I've been involved in campaigns, been involved in marches and demonstrations. So you can kind of say it's in my blood. But part of that was also a very strong commitment to the public sector. You know, working for government was always a huge honor in the state of Texas. It was something that we grew up aspiring to. You know, if you work for the city or the county or the state, you kind of made it. So that sort of was my background, and I think it really shaped what I do today here in California, and especially with the Office of Women's Policy. Well,
so you talk about this political movement. Did you have any heroes that you look up to that helped inform what you wanted to do? It sounds like perhaps your parents were some? Or?
Yeah, I think my parents were probably the biggest influence. You know, they were very hardworking. They had their own construction business in the 1970s, and they were some of the first minorities in construction and that were looking for state and federal contracts and getting involved in that process. So I observed them sort of being the pioneers of getting into a lot of areas where minorities at that point didn't have a lot of presence. So as a small business in Texas, I felt like the entrepreneurship, the sort of the tenacity of working through these big systems that you didn't know about, that you were trying to learn for the purpose of advancing your own economic security and, you know, the well-being of your family, those left a large impression on me. So throughout that time, you know, as the economy would shift and as political conditions changed, I think that's been sort of a North Star for me. What are the opportunities for every family, regardless of what ethnicity they are, what language they speak? How do we have more equitable opportunity in this country? That's something I think I've carried throughout my career.
Sounds like it. So you came from Texas to Santa Clara County? I mean, you and your husband, or
yes,
tell me about
that. Yes, we did. My husband actually, you know, had been in teaching. He was a classroom teacher for many years, and then sort of moved more into the policy and research area. He got accepted at Stanford University for a doctoral program, so we sort of made the decision to cut, you know, ties in Texas, sell everything, put everything in the wagon, and just come out west.
Oh, wow.
So it was great. We got here in 2004. We had a brand new baby, a 5-week-old son, and so it was an adjustment. California politics, California lifestyle, very different from the South of the U.S.
So you got here and your first job was with the Office of Women's Policy? Did it exist then, or?
It did, and the office has actually been around since 1998, but there was an opening in the Office of Women's Policy, so I applied and became the director in 2005, and it was exciting. There were a lot of things happening at the time with Santa Clara County, a lot of interest in women, justice involved women and girls, so that was sort of the initial work that we set out to do in the office.
Well, tell me more about that. What are some of the initiatives that you have or are currently involved with?
Well, the theme of looking at the needs of women and girls in the justice system has always been there since I got to California. I think, you know, the question of how frequently women come into the system, why are they coming in at faster rates than men, what happens to them while they're in these systems, and what is the impact to children. Those are all themes that the county has been very concerned about. So in 2008, we released a report called Breaking Cycles, Rebuilding Lives, and the whole thing was really to document what are the life experiences and pathways into jail of women in Santa Clara County. It is one of the first reports in the country that profiled women at the county level. There's
wow.
some research on women at the prison level, even internationally, but there hadn't been a lot of work on women that are really essentially in short-term incarceration at that time. So it was a very exciting report. It illuminated a lot about conditions that women were coming in with, how they do their time, and then what they needed when they left the system.
Did it examine what are the causes that may have gotten women there, and are there differences, gender differences, and?
Yeah, I think generally, despite what the media says, we find that women are still today, as they were back then, pretty much non-violent, low-level crimes, involved in those crimes. You could classify them as crimes of survival, lots of theft, lots of things where it was just an economic need that was driving the activity. But the other big thing we saw was a lot of substance abuse. And so part of that, when we began to scratch through the surface of, what are these charges, we begin to find that one of the big things among the female population is exposure to violence, early exposure to abuse as children. And so there were these themes of, cycles of violence followed by cycles of criminal justice involvement that became this cycle of incarceration that is very difficult to break. So I think that was our breakthrough of really seeing these overlapping cycles, and then the idea that most children of people in jail live with mom. So their incarceration and the interventions for them are pretty significant in terms of how do we impact the well-being of those children and their future involvement in the system.
The things you're talking about are very profound. Are you finding that as you go to conferences or whatever, that other counties or other communities are becoming more aware of it? Or is Santa Clara County really groundbreaking in what you guys have been doing?
It's really interesting. I think Santa Clara County has taken a lot of bold steps to begin looking at what is happening in our jail system. And I do think that we have been at the forefront of a lot of that movement, but we are finding other communities in the Bay Area are also looking at that. I think we all see the same cycles that overlap. I think that we're all looking for ways to make our systems more efficient, more effective. We don't want a lot of people cycling in and out of these county systems that are set up to really help people on a short-term basis. We know for years jail is essentially long-term incarceration just based on recidivism. Our systems, as they have been developed, have kind of kept people trapped in this cycle of incarceration. So what you see in Santa Clara County now is a movement to how do we break through this? Realignment in California extended the sentences at the local level. Because
and what do you mean by realignment? Explain that for people.
So very basically, realignment was just a movement to say, there are some low-level nonviolent offenders at the state level that it would be more appropriate to house at the local level because the state system was overwhelmed. And by court order, they were asked to reduce their numbers. So they began to look at counties as an option where they could send offenders to serve out sentences. And so now we've got this system where we're trying to transform our local system into a longer-term incarceration. So we're looking at programming. We're looking at our classification systems. We're looking at staffing, programming. So all of this to accommodate this longer sentence period, but also to keep track of what's actually working. Because I think if we don't change and sort of evolve in the programming based on the needs of the offenders, we're sort of keeping the cycle going.
So let me ask you this. What are the examples of programs that can help break the cycle? What can folks do who are in the system to re-educate themselves, to learn skills?
I think two things. Vocational training, absolutely, has been very successful with the incarcerated population. We're trying to look at ways to give people skills while they're in custody that they can then sort of take out into the community and turn into a job opportunity or to access more training. So we're definitely interested here in Santa Clara County in working on vocational training opportunities for the females. I think that's a new frontier as well. We've done some pilots where we're moving women into non-traditional.
And what are some of the programs that people could look forward to?
I think if you look at a lot of the workforce centers in Santa Clara County, I think what they're doing is looking at, sort of the blue-collar vocational training. Can people do welding? Can people do construction, green building?
So these are jobs that actually can pay something more than a service sector wage.
Right, that's the goal, because I think when a person leaves jail and they move into minimum wage or low-wage jobs, the likelihood of being able to support a family on that is not very high. And what we see, especially with the women, is if you have to feed your family and you're trying to survive, you're going to do what you need to. And what we're seeing a lot of is people repeating the same behavior that got them in trouble in the first place. So we have to give them different opportunities. Then jail becomes intervention, a very important point of intervention to get people ready with education, skill building, so that when they leave, they can either move into a job or move into training to get to a job.
And do you find the support systems and the Board of Supervisors and all that are encouraging this kind of new direction?
Absolutely, because I know when we did our study, two of the things that women said they needed to leave jail and not come back were housing and jobs. When we asked the men the same thing, it was, basically the same answer. People need economic security right off the bat. They need basic needs met. They need clothing, they need food. So I think the county has done a good job of funding those services out in the community, and now is really trying to coordinate response into areas of, what does this population need, or is there something unique for veterans, for women? And so they're really trying to move in the direction of trying to be responsive to the needs of these people that are coming out of our system.
You had also mentioned substance abuse is a problem or a symptom, I guess.
Right.
Are there programs to help people kind of get free of those issues?
I think absolutely. There are programs that do that. But first of all, it has to be the recognition of why people do what they do, why people act in the ways they do. So part of the challenge when you're working in a jail setting, I think, is it's very fast-paced. You're dealing with a large population, trying to feed them, clothe them, get them to court, do the whole thing 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. The management of the offender then becomes a point of how do we actually do better at how we move this population in and out of facilities? How do we keep them busy, out of trouble? And so you have to really look at what are the specific needs and strategies. Trauma is a big theme with all offenders. We're seeing it among the women, but we're also seeing some of that among the men.
Explain what you mean by trauma.
If you look at the average person sitting in the jail, it is very likely that there was criminal justice involvement by the parents, that there was also juvenile justice involvement by that individual. But if you go back even earlier, a lot of these folks were victims of trauma themselves. They were children who were abused. They were children who witnessed violence.
Oh, wow.
And so for the women, they suffered early victimization, childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse, or they were in domestic violence relationships. We also see that in terms of the crimes. A lot of times women are coming in with those crimes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, more from Esther on very interesting stuff.
Hi, I'm State Senator Jerry Hill. Thanks for watching today, and thanks for your involvement. You need to do what I've been doing for many years, and that's get involved, get things done so that you can improve your community. The only way you can do that is to participate, and you can participate in the Santa Clara County Democratic Party because they are progressive, they make things happen, and they bring the services home for all of the individuals, those who can least afford it, those who need it, the most vulnerable in our society, who need the help that they can, and the support for education. All of those things are important. Those are the values that I hold dear, and I know those are the values that you hold dear. So please, do what you can to help. Join, participate, be a member of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party, and you can do that by making a phone call, looking at the information on your screen now, and making a difference for all of us. Thanks for watching.
Welcome back to Democratic Television. We're having a great conversation with the Director of the Office of Women's Policy, Esther, and thank you for still being here, I guess. We were talking about the work that the office does in terms of incarcerated folks, and are there paths that people can take, guidance to sort of get back on their feet and all that. A semi-related topic is the whole question of what are we doing in schools to help educate kids about the real world, sort of a civic engagement discussion. And I know you've been involved in working to do that, both in terms of, we've had a major election recently, but it's sort of an ongoing thing. It's not just around election time that we need to help young people, and by extension everybody, be more educated and articulate about what does it mean to be to live in our community, our society.
I think it's an excellent, relevant discussion now, post-election, because voting is really the first step. And I think, recently we had an opportunity to go into schools. Some of the county employees who are also members of SEMA, the County's Executive Management Association. So we got together and decided, let's go into the schools and talk to young people and kind of find out pre-election, what are they thinking about? Are they interested in engaging? And so it was a really interesting experience talking to young people about what they were understanding about the election, what they thought about the candidates, where they were getting their information. So I think, everybody sort of saw the election as the end point. And part of the discussion we had was what happens after the election. So now you're in office, and now we have a whole new set of decision makers. Does that mean we sit back and sort of let the process happen? Do we let government just sort of, be left in the hands of the people that we elect into office? I think that's generally how the public sees it. We disengage, and then we kind of wait for the next election, and when we don't like what one person did, we find another one. I think that's why we tend to just sort of check out in terms of civic engagement. So when you start having conversations, especially with young people, about does your voice matter? How can you make your voice heard? And you start talking about things that are relevant and immediate to them. How are things going at your school? How are things in your neighborhood?
But when you guys did this, what did you find? What was the reality? Are kids aware of everything they need to be? I mean, I'd say most adults aren't.
It's really interesting. In the classes that I did, I found it was an exercise in hearing exactly what you hear in media. I think the messages, the images, the perceptions, whether they were fact or fiction, they're very impressionable. Young people pick that up, they echo it back. So there's not a lot of thinking. So we start talking to them about, well, let's take that apart. Let's take this one, what is essentially an assumption about a person, and let's examine that. How do we know that's true? Is it really something based on fact, or did we just hear it so much now we believe it? So when you start getting young people involved and they realize the influence of media and that they're shaping their opinion around that, then they kind of pause and think about that. So I felt like we were getting a lot of sound bites about everything you're hearing in the media. And so it was when you start talking about real life experiences, then you kind of get a different conversation going. How are decisions made? Why do you come to class at 7:15 in the morning? How do you get to school? Are there sidewalks in your neighborhood that are good sidewalks? Do you have bike lanes? And so then you get a whole different response about what you should be thinking about.
And maybe potential ownership of our communities based on what was on the ballot, and if something passes, we may have gotten more affordable housing. Or
absolutely. And it was an opportunity for people to even understand what government does. Everything that happens in our daily lives in some way or form is influenced by political decision making.
Sure.
And I think that's what was a new one for some of these young people. Making connections between who we put in office is going to have a big impact on my life.
Did you and your colleagues come away from there with any conclusions, like we need to step up this effort, get it more pervasively understood and supported in our public schools? I
think so, because there was high interest from the schools, from the county's Board of Education. Everybody wants to have a more involved electorate and a more involved sort of population. Government works better when people are involved, when we're having accountability, when we have transparency. And I think that's one thing. It was a sort of a jaded theme we heard from young people. Well, the system's already set up, and they're criminals, and there were these really negative perceptions. That's probably a result of the negative campaigning we see. And so I think, it's been said that we really need to rethink this paradigm of how we do our politics, how we run for office, the messages we use, because it's no longer just impacting the voter who is an adult. It's impacting every person, every child who is watching television, who is watching the internet. And so it's really a dialogue that includes the whole family. So if you think of the past election, a lot of that discussion was done based on an adult audience and really not being aware or sensitive to the fact that many, many children, millions of children, are witnessing the dialogue.
Well, I think people felt a lot of the discussions were at least R-rated, and topics were raised that had never been raised before, and those topics tended to drive out the discussions at the lower level, the state level, the local county level and city levels and all that.
Yeah, I think that was very important. We had housing bonds on the ballot, and we had conversations with young people. Some of you rent, some of you own homes. Talk to your parents. Are they happy with the amount of taxes they pay? Do they feel like they're getting services for the money that they pay? So it was a much richer discussion about how to think more deeply about voting.
And so as long as we have the educational system committed to having these discussions, I know the stereotype is it's always teach to the test, and we have to produce a certain level of excellent scores for us to continue our funding. We have to break that. I think maybe what you're talking about is school board members being more educated about the possibility of this depth.
Right, because I think in terms of civic engagement, you're talking about something that is a lot harder to test. I think there's already a very negative sense of testing from students. I mean, the research is showing there's tremendous anxiety, so we're already testing a lot of things. I don't think that civic engagement, testing that is going to help us really engage students. But we can look at things like, what is context? What is the role of, understanding your neighborhood, understanding your family, understanding your community, and can you tap into other ways to measure that? Can kids do projects in the community? Can they put together portfolios? We had one group of young women in a leadership program that put together a video before the election called Tia Rossi. And their idea was, we see a lot of women engaging in campaigns and doing a lot of the behind-the-scenes work, but it's always in support of some bigger group, or men are the leaders of the group. So they really wanted to send a message about the role of women, and they put together a fantastic video about the role of women in elections, in decision making, and they were really supporting each other and saying, talk to your aunts, talk to your mother, talk to them about getting engaged. So it was a really neat message to bring the generations together and really support other women who are part of this process.
Well, and it seems to me if our kids are saying to us, the parents, we really want to learn how to get engaged, and mom, dad, aunts, uncles, how are you engaging? That's got to be a, oops, I better think this through.
Right.
I better step up.
Absolutely, and what we heard from some of the students is their parents aren't voting, or the parents don't know how to vote, or they're Spanish speaking. So we were saying, you may not be old enough to vote, but if you can help your parents understand there's different ways to register to vote, there's different languages you can request the information in, those are really important steps. And the students were excited about that. I could see that they wanted to engage in a different way. And I said, and it doesn't have to be a long conversation. It can take just a few minutes, but have it with your parents, have it with your aunts and uncles, and help, register our voters. Here's the phone number. Here's the website. Mom, do you want me to register you to vote? At least I'll type it in and we can send it in for you. There's different things that the students were excited about and ways they could engage.
Well, and I think you said earlier, we tend to bring things up around election season. Right. And so we almost trivialize it or say, we're only going to do this now. But civic education has to be something we do all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, we would love to see schools coming out more often to the county of Santa Clara. Come into our building, come to see where the meetings happen. Come meet some of these decision makers, come meet some of the departments that offer these services and give your input. We've had lots of students come through and sort of say, hey, I have a friend that went to juvenile hall and this happened. And, it's like their life experience, their context is really how we can listen to, are we doing a good job out there as the county? So I definitely think we need more community involvement, engagement. People need to feel a part of government. So we're definitely working toward that.
So a little bit more about the Office of Women's Policy. There's an advisory body, the Commission on the Status of Women. How does that relate to all of this?
The county has, I think, over 30 boards and commissions, and these boards and commissions really advise the county on how effective are your services. We in our office have a commission on the status of women, so 15 women from across the county can apply for a seat, and then they come and sort of go through the process of determining what's the highest priority for women and girls. What do women and girls need? What are the resources that we allocate now to support their development and advancement? And then, what are some of the changes we need to see from a policy perspective, from a budget perspective? So these commissions are very vital to the county. They help us keep our finger on the pulse of the community and the needs out there. So definitely serving on a board and commission is one strategy. Coming to volunteer, during an election, coming to volunteer for events that happen. We do a lot of awareness raising events, film screenings. So if anybody wanted to come and just get educated, get engaged, volunteer, there's a lot of opportunity to do that.
So we have about 2 minutes left. Is there a way that you would recommend specifically to learn more about?
Sure. I think anything you want to know about the county, first of all, you would go to sccgov.org. And that's the County of Santa Clara's website. Our office is owp.sccgov.org. You can just, do a search for Office of Women's Policy SCC. And our website has phone numbers, resources. We have videos of meetings and events that we've had. So if you weren't able to attend, you can catch up on things and the latest on what is happening for women and girls.
And are these meetings public meetings so someone can just come sit in? You don't have to sign up in advance or?
Absolutely. And in fact, most of the meetings of the county are videotaped or they're televised. So you can log on to the county website. If you're interested in what happens with Children, Family, and Seniors Committee, you can log on there and see the meetings, see what was discussed. So there's a lot you can learn, and you don't even have to leave the comfort of your home.
So what are some things you're looking forward to doing in the next few years in terms of advancing all this work?
I think definitely strengthening our relationship with the broader community, letting people see the opportunities to engage and to be part of government and decision making, and then to also develop better mechanisms to find out, is what we're doing and the programs and services that we offer actually working out there? We need feedback.
And do you feel that the decision makers are doing things to encourage that kind of feedback?
Absolutely. I think we're doing a lot in the area of language access. I think we're doing a lot in the area of developing protocols to better serve specific communities. We have offices in the county, the Office of LGBTQ Affairs, the Office of Immigrant Relations, the Office of Human Relations, Office of Cultural Competency. The county executive's office in particular has very unique specific offices to deal with those the needs of those specific populations. So it's a really interesting time at Santa Clara County.
Very cool. Esther, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for watching Democratic Television. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website, www.sccdp.org. Help make a difference.